This is the second part to the Ahriman deception that we were touching base on in the last video. And I'll just cover a summary of what was talked about. So initially in the beginning of this lecture about the Ahrimanic deception, Rudolf Steiner kind of explains the Luciferic age, how it was birthed before, Christ impulse came in. It had birth of, creativity, of course. But then it's like the energies of the Luciferian is more just, there's no direction. It's out of body experiences, just kind of indulgence, but then also creates and births creativity and different arts. And then we have the Christ impulse, the Golgotha mystery of the hill that he was crucified on. All these different theories that we'd never know for certain, but can only go off of documentation in the scripture and just trusting in it, right? I mean, essentially, this is what can be applied to all things when we're not witness to it firsthand. But the whole evolution of humanity, it just speaks of a story of evolution, and then also how there's so many different deities, even before Christ, that represented a figure such as Jesus, right? And then we go into afterwards the preparation to the Ahrimanic phase, which is Ahriman, so Lucifer, Luciferian, right? So there's the other name of Satan, which is what they would say is Ahriman, is the Satan, right? So it's like we have the Christ impulse in the middle, and we have Lucifer on one pole, Ahriman or Satan on the other, and they are antagonists, energies, the antagonistic energies that kind of, it's like opposition, right? So as we evolve, we need to have something opposing, but it's kind of like this phase of evolution. So now we're going to continue on. Whence does this come? It comes from the fact that present human thinking, the present intellect, lies in a stratum of being where it does not reach down to realities. One can therefore prove something quite strictly, and also prove its opposite. It is possible today to prove spiritualism on the one hand and materialism on the other. And people may fight against each other for equally good standpoints, because present-day intellectualism is in an upper layer of reality and does not go down into the depths of being. And it is the same with party opinions. A man who does not look deeper, but simply lets himself be accepted into a certain party circle by reason of his education, heredity, circumstances of life and state, quite honestly believes, or so he thinks, in the possibility of proving the tenets of the party into which he has slipped, as he says. And then he fights against someone else who has slipped into another party. And the one is just as right as the other. This comparison, okay, just stepping back, this comparison reminds me of what? It reminds me of all the different groups of religions. It reminds me of politics. It reminds me of, there's so many different comparisons, right? But continuing. So this calls forth chaos and confusion over mankind that will gradually become greater and greater unless men see through it. Unless men see through it. Ahriman makes use of this confusion in order to prepare the triumph of his incarnation and to drive men with increasing force into what they find so difficult to realize, namely, that by intellectual or modern scientific reasoning today, one can prove anything and equally well prove its opposite. The point is for us to recognize that everything can be proved, and for that reason, to examine the proofs, put forward in science today. It is only in natural science that reality is shown by the facts. In no other field can one consider intellectual proofs valid. The only way to escape the danger that threatens, if one accepts the lures of Ahriman and his desire to drive men deeper and deeper into these things, is to realize through anthroposophical spiritual science that human knowledge must be sought or in a stratum deeper than that in which the validity of our proofs arise. And so, in order to create dissensions, Ahriman also makes use of what develops from the old conditions of heredity, which man has really outgrown in the fifth post-Atlantean epoch. The Ahrimanic powers use all that is derived from old circumstances of heredity in order to set men against each other in conflicting groups. All that comes from old differences of family, race, tribe, peoples is used by Ahriman to create confusion. I'm going to repeat that again because I think it is extra crucial to point this out, especially during these times. The Ahrimanic powers use all that is derived from old circumstances of heredity in order to set men against each other in conflicting groups. All that comes from old differences of family, race, tribe, peoples is used by Ahriman to create confusion. Freedom for every nation, even the smallest. These were fine-sounding words, but the powers hostile to man always use fine words in order to bring confusion. Fine words meaning very articulate, very well-spoken, manipulating through words, through speech. And in order to attain the things that Ahriman wishes to attain for his incarnation. If we inquire, who stirs up nations against each other? Who raises the questions that are directing humanity today? The answer is the Ahrimanic deception, which plays into human life. And in this field, men very easily let themselves be deceived. They are not willing to descend to the lower strata where reality is to be found. For you see, Ahriman skillfully prepares his goal beforehand. Ever since the Reformation and the Renaissance, the economist has been emerging in modern civilization as the representative governing type. That is an actual historical fact. If you go back to ancient times, even to those that I have characterized today as Luciferic, who were the governing types then? Initiates. The Egyptian pharaohs, the Babylonian rulers, the Asiatic rulers, they were initiates. Then the priest type emerged as ruler, and the priest type was really the ruler right up to the Reformation and the Renaissance. Since that time, the economist has been in command. Rulers are in fact merely the handymen, the understrappers of the economists. One must not imagine that the rulers of modern times are anything but the understrappers of the economists. And all that has resulted by way of law and justice, one should only study it carefully, is simply a consequence of what economically oriented men have thought. In the 19th century, the economical man is replaced for the first time by the man thinking in terms of banking. And in the 19th century, there is created for the first time the organization of finance, which swamps every other relationship. One must only be able to look into these things and follow them up empirically and practically. If men do not realize that the rights state and the organism of the spirit must be set against the economic order called up through the economists and the banks, then again, through this lack of awareness, Ahriman will find an important instrument for preparing his incarnation. His incarnation is undoubtedly coming. It's already here, honestly. And this lack of insight will enable him to prepare it triumphantly. Such means can be used by Ahriman for a certain type of man, but there is another type. Indeed, the two are often mixed in one personality. And this also, from a different direction, provides Ahriman with an easy way to success. Now, it is the fact that in real life, total errors are not so harmful as half or quarter truths. Total errors are soon seen through, whereas half and quarter truths mislead people. They live with them. These partial truths become a pan of life and cause the most horrible devastation. There are people today who do not realize the one-sidedness of the Galileo Copernican world conception. or who at least do not see its illusory character, or are too easygoing to examine it. We have just shown how wrong that is, but there are also people today, numberless people, who acknowledge a certain half-truth, a very significant half-truth, and who do not go into the question of the purely hypothetical justification of it. Hold on. Okay, back. And change the positioning so I can be a little more comfortable. I just need to get like a table or something, or have like a studio of some sort. That would make all of this a lot easier. Where'd I leave off? Okay. Strange as it may appear to many people, it is just as one-sided to view the world solely through the gospel and reject any other research into true reality, as it is to view the world from the standpoint of Galileo and Copernicus, or of university materialistic science in general. The gospel was given to us, or given to those who lived in the first centuries of Christianity, and to believe that today the gospel can give the whole truth of Christianity, but it is simply a half-truth. It is therefore also a half-error which befogs people and thus furnishes Ahriman with the best means of attaining the goal and the triumph of his incarnation, because it's an absolute. Ahriman's energy, the vibe of Ahriman, signifies absolutism, calcification. There is no possibility other than. So therefore, even if, and this is not even to say or disregard any kind of viewpoint or belief or religion, this is simply to say that it can become a tool to Ahriman's forces, Ahrimanic energies in the world. Like, for example, when I can just kind of list off some different things here. It's like, there's people who are completely against Christianity. And so they'll say, well, they'll point out the hypocrisies in it. Then when they point out the hypocrisies, like, for example, there's this expectation, right, to be perfect, to follow and be the example of what you believe. And yes, I think really what it is, it's giving you, it helps you to have more structure and to develop morality more easily. But the way it can be used against is by judgments, shaming, looking at others. And then also it's used as a tool to call people out. See, there's no proof in this. And then it just, Ahrimanic forces, energy can use this to pit everyone against each other, end up fighting, saying, no, you're wrong. It has to be this way. And then in regards to even arguments into political things, like politicians use these talking points all of the time to set people against each other. So, but both points have arguments that you can still see, things, you can see some legitimacy in every possible argument. But the thing is, what Rudolf Steiner is pointing out is that by battling and constantly combating who is right, who is the more correct, we end up just being too concerned and too busy fighting together amongst each other instead of finding a combined truth, right? A root of things at the very basic of levels of realities, which there's no such thing as absolutism, then that is not possible either, right? So it really is a circle. It is a circle. It's like it's the infinity, really. But I'm going to continue. So, how numerous are those who think they are speaking out of Christian humility, but in reality, out of dreadful arrogance. Oh, we need no spiritual science. The homeliness, the simplicity of the Gospels lead us to what men need of the eternal. A frightful arrogance is expressed, for the most part, in this apparent humility, which can very well be used by Ahriman in the sense I have indicated. Yeah. For do not forget what I explained at the beginning of today's lecture, how in the time in which the gospel falls, men were still permeated by the Luciferic impulse in their thoughts, feelings, and general views, and they could not understand the gospel by a certain Luciferic gnosis. But the grasp of the gospel in this old sense is not possible today. No real understanding of the Christ can be gained if one relies merely on the gospel itself, especially in the form in which it has been handed down. There exists nowhere today a less true understanding of Christ than in the various forms of faiths and confessions. So, and again, I'm going to point out this does not disregard religion or beliefs, or this is not trying to say that is not true or this is not true. This is purely just detaching yourself of what you know, detaching, becoming almost like you're looking on the outside, observing from a bigger picture view of things. So, the gospel must be deepened by spiritual science if we wish to gain an actual grasp of the Christ. So when spiritual science in itself is spiritual, right? It is to seek knowledge. Knowledge is different from wisdom. Wisdom is having a moral, wisdom is about applying the moral integrities in your life and living them. Knowledge is knowing in your mind, but not applying it. Wisdom is applying it and living it, being it, emulating it. Okay, I'm going to go skip to this bottom here. We must see through such things as these today. Purely mundane science would make men entirely subject to illusion. In fact, ultimately, they would commit only follies. And we've already seen this. We've already heard these things in the news, in various outlets, right? In social media already. Quite enough folly is perpetuated today already. For surely the World War catastrophe was a great folly. Yet many people were involved in it, who were thoroughly saturated with the official secular science of our time. And if you notice what remarkable psychological phenomena at once crop up when some sect or other places one of the four gospels in the foreground, then you will more easily understand what I have been saying about the gospels today. See how strongly inclined to all sorts of hallucinations are sects that pay heed solely to the gospel of St. John or solely to the gospel of St. Luke. Fortunately, there are four gospels which outwardly contradict one another. Fascinating, right? And this has so far prevented the great harm. And that's an interesting thing to point out. That is preventing. It helps to prevent when we have different viewpoints, but it can still be used, right? It can halt the process of it being easier because there's so many different things that you have to, there's so many different areas that need to be synced up. It's not as simple. It's like, for example, populations, right? It's if you want to decrease the surplus population, right? There's so many different areas and there's so many people that it's hard to control every aspect. I mean, you can, but because it is so diverse and so much more to it, it takes time and it takes longer. So that actually works in our favor to have this very variety there and more avenues there. But like I said, it can develop a lot more opposition, a lot more. So unless we can wake up and realize the truths. That basically is to let go of the calcified ego. Anyways, I'm ranting on. I'm going to continue the rest of this. Yeah, so, and this has so far prevented the great harm which such one-sidedness would cause. By being faced with four gospels, people do not go too far in the direction of the one, but have the others beside it. One gospel is read aloud on one Sunday and another on another Sunday, and so the illusory power of the one is counterbalanced by that of another. A great wisdom lies in the fact that these four gospels have come down to the civilized world. In this way, man is protected from being caught up by just one stream, which will take possession of him. Yes, as in the case of so many members of the sects. So, when solely one gospel works upon him, it is particularly clear how this leads at last to hallucination. Now, when we speak of gospels, and I know that during these times, during Rudolf Steiner's times, it was more simple back then. Now, in our day and age, there are even more religions. There's even, well, they all have, you can simplify it just based off of the most basic of viewpoints, right? If it's all based off of self-serving, or if it's based off of, just following what you're told, right? And also, how do you view, like, who is your idol? Who do you worship? Everyone worships a different thing. Even atheists worship something. Yes, because if you think about it, human beings, we are programmed to have a preference to something. Now, when it comes to certain things, even if you profess and say you don't believe in anything at all, even if you profess, you still have beliefs in some things, you will still have a preference to something. Whether it is a human that you mentor, you will look up to them. That will be your idol then to replace. Or if it's a diet or just a way of living, these are the way that we're mapped out. We believe in something. Now, you can say, oh, but it's not spiritual related. I don't believe in the higher realms of spirituality. I don't believe in anything spiritual. I think I only believe in what's in front of me. That's still a religion in itself. It's a realist religion, yes. It's more of a, that's kind of what I think, right? But we all have coping mechanisms as at the same time. I don't care who you are. You can say, people will have the argument, the only reason why people believe in God and believe in religion is because it's a coping mechanism. Yes, I know. I actually brought that up in a different video where I recognize that, where yes, that could be a point that could be proven as well. And like he was mentioning before, it's because of dreadful of consequences, or you're being succumbed to something, you're fearful of being punished. So by fear, which yes, there's religions that actually gain their, and I'm going to say manipulation because yes, the word manipulation has more negativity tied to the word, but essentially manipulation, everyone manipulates. I don't care who you are. Every one of us manipulates. Okay? We all have that. This is a human quality that we have. We must see this within ourselves. Like Carl Jung, he talks about this, about seeing our shadow. I'm ranting again, so I'm going to go back here. Okay. So we're almost at the end here. In fact, it is essential today to give up much of one's subjective inclination, much of what one is attached to and thinks pious or clever. Mankind must above all seek universality, universally Okay. Use. And the courage to look at things from all sides. And I agree. I agree. And I'll admit, you know, I get in my modes where I get very calcified at times. I'm a human being. I'm not subject to you know, I am not immune to having my triggers, right? I can become calcified in some things. And I've noticed that in certain areas, especially nowadays, this points out to me more where I'm noticing my own Ahrimanic influences in my life. And I would like to say that I am working as much as I can to counteract that on a daily basis. Sometimes I need a reminder, you know, but yeah, it's to see things from all sides. But regardless, what separates us from, and this actually goes in with the wisdom and the knowledge thing. Wisdom, intuition. We are set with morals. There are universal morals that are connected to our intuitive feeling in our bodies. When we do something wrong, your body has a reaction to it. You will feel sick. You will feel nauseous. You will feel ill. It will make you feel ill. Some people choose to deny that. Some people choose to ignore that feeling. So therefore, the more that they ignore it, the more they continue to just keep going with that action, the less and less the intuition's there. The spirit will slowly leave the body, the Christ consciousness that we all have, by the way, we all have. This is linked to a different thing. So detach yourself from a religion, just look at it as a spiritual force. So we all must come to grips with that, because this is what Ahriman works with, the tools to confuse. He is the ultimate debater. He is the one that can manipulate and twist words to make it work. And he will point to facts. He will point to numbers. You can even manipulate statistics, for crying out loud. And that's exactly what Ahriman would most definitely do. Why wouldn't he? To make his point solidified and calcified, to prove a point. The ultimate calcified ego, which is only to self-serve. So this last part from Rudolf Steiner's lecture says, I wish to say this to you today so that you may realize that what one tries now to bring about within humanity has truly deeper grounds than just some sort of subjective prejudice. In fact, one can say that it is read from the signs of the times and that it must be brought about. Powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. This is a long video, but I love that I'm learning more about this. That I know for a fact there's so much more that I must get into to learn about his teachings. And I know that there's another person who was very prominent in astrology, actually. I forgot. He was Bulgarian. He was a Bulgarian astrologer, but they were living at the same times, during the same times, and just lived in different spots. But I want to get into his works as well eventually at some point. But I just find it so intriguing and intellectually inspiring. And it was really long. I hope you made it to the end. If you didn't, that's fine. It's a long, long video. But I will continue to make videos like this. Hopefully you guys will like it. I just love to learn. So peace out.